Well, hello again, guys, from here on the streets of Gosforth, where, would you believe, it is gloriously sunny and calm as well. Who would have thought that? Now, is it sunny and calm inside Newcastle United? It certainly hasn't been this summer, and during the past couple of weeks, a storm has been blowing. On the evidence of Eddie Howe's press conference there this morning, I don't think it's past either. While there is a want, I think, collectively for calm now and to focus on the football, issues remain. We can't turn a blind eye to that. We've got to report that and we've got to explore that. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, Eddie this morning came out and gave a fairly robust, intelligent defence in response to Paul Mitchell's claims in his interview 9 days ago. Now, in it, Mitchell said that Newcastle's transfer strategy over the past few years hasn't been, quote, fit for purpose. I put that to Eddie Howe this morning. Eddie Howe, and it was telling, took a deep breath, paused, he sighed and said, I've got a few thoughts on that. And he started and he spoke at length, and it was quite telling how, robust is the word I would use. And we'll go into more detail in terms of exactly what he said in just a moment. But just as an overall thought on that, because I think we do have to sort of retrace the steps of how we've got to today, Eddie Howe's the most intelligent guy in the building. And for Newcastle to risk alienating him and losing him, I think that's incredibly, incredibly dangerous. It's what I've written about in this morning's Daily Mail. I'll put a link in the description below to that. But I think we've got to go back basically to Paul Mitchell's interview, which was 9 days ago now. Now, we got wind that Mitchell was going to speak to us after the game against Spurs. And you're talking amongst yourselves as journalists, a little bit of insight here. And everyone, I think, agrees that on the back of a very turbulent summer, Eddie's words in Germany, and then the way the window closed by not bringing in Mark Gay or anyone in that regard. There was the failed deadline day pursuit for Anthony Elanga. It was a little bit of a mess. We all agreed that it was sensible that Paul Mitchell did come out and speak to us and did front up. But I also said to my colleagues at the time, I wasn't sure it was the best idea for the club. Now, why did I say that? Some of my colleagues were surprised. Well, no, why would you be of that opinion? And I was of that opinion because at that stage, I was already aware of some of the things I'd written about in the article this morning there in terms of how Paul Mitchell had been received initially inside the club by players, by staff, during those initial introductory meetings where, from what I'm told, he rubbed a few people up the wrong way. There was a lot of talk of him being elite. I think he used that word several times. I think the manner of it wasn't really well received by some. He spoke about coming on a journey with him. And I think there was just guys there who were sat, be it staff, be it players, whoever, were sat thinking, well, hold on a minute. We've been on our own journey for the last 2.5 years. We've been pretty elite during that time. We've done a pretty good job. And for Paul Mitchell to come in with what has been described as quite an abrasive attitude. Now, you may well turn around and argue, that's his job. He's paid to come in and stamp his mark on the club. He's the guy at the head, really, in terms of being the sporting director now, in terms of that sporting entity. So you may well, that's his one, that's his prerogative. But everything I've been told was that a lot of it felt a little needless, a little too soon. So that's why I had concerns about the interview, that if he adopted the same mantra, the same manner, that it might not go down well with those internally. And as I wrote in the Daily Mail this morning at Mail Online, some of what he said went down, quote, like the Titanic. And that is because it centred on 2 or 3 key themes during the interview. And I was there during the 90 minutes with him. And yes, he was engaging. He spoke passionately about what he wanted to do. He was jovial. He was generous with his time. And again, if you think that Newcastle's transfer strategy during the last couple of years has put them in a position whereby they're having to solve that £70 million hole in the account because of PSR, and you think they have been a little bit reckless, then okay, maybe it's Paul Mitchell's words talk to you. Maybe you're on side with what he says in terms of having to redraw things and have a new approach. But the manner in which you went about it to say that what they've done over the last few years was, quote, not fit for purpose. When he said that in the interview, a bomb just goes off in your head. You're thinking, wow, that is not the way to go about this. To then repeatedly refer to Eddie Howe as smart and intelligent enough to understand the changes needed. Now, was that deliberate? Was that clumsy? Either way, it felt a little passive-aggressive, a little patronising, and again, just a little needless in terms of that messaging it sends to your manager. Who will say that. And then also as well, and this was one of the points I put to Eddie this morning, Paul Mitchell said during the interview that he had, quote, and he said this repeatedly, he'd, quote, only played a supporting role during the summer in terms of the transfers. I said to Eddie, well, that would suggest that you and the previous team were still leading the transfer process this summer. Again, Eddie paused and said he didn't think it would be right and didn't think it would help their situation if he commented on all aspects of Paul Mitchell's interview. And I thought that was really telling. And I then finished by asking him, have you spoken to Paul Mitchell since the interview 9 days ago? There was some suggestion earlier in the week that all was well, from inside the club. Everything was okay. They'd spoken, looking ahead to future windows, and everything was, moving on. Eddie said, no, they haven't spoken. I think that's quite staggering. For the interview, the contents of it, and for the subsequent reaction to it in the press and beyond, for the sporting director then not to reach out to the manager and give him some context or give him some reassurance and let it sit for 9 days, be it a phone call or at the training ground, wherever, I couldn't get my head around that. And for Eddie to reveal that, I just thought was really telling and speaks to the difficulties that currently are behind the scenes at Newcastle. Now, it is a minority, it's a vocal minority of supporters react to news of this when you're posting things during the course of the week, calling it negative and this isn't helpful. Goodness, come on, if you want to go to long signs and just bury your head, then be my guest, do it. But we're trying to tell you what is going on inside the club, what is real. This is real. And Newcastle risk losing over time the best thing that has happened to them during 2.5 years of Saudi ownership. I really feel strongly and passionately about that. Eddie Howe has been quite incredible. They got so lucky. Now, I use the word lucky. They appointed him, so they deserve credit. But wow, for him to come in and transform the club the way he's done with a lot of players he inherited, the recruitment as well, he was right at the centre of that. He said that today. He takes ownership for all of the signings. He said he was incredibly proud. He loves them to bits. He thinks they were brilliant signings. And this was all in direct response to the question about Paul Mitchell's comments. For him to do all of that and then find himself this summer at a juncture where, from all of the information and my own take, and you marry the two together, everything goes into it. And we don't write these pieces lightly, whereby he has been left to feel the way he does. And he was, again, quite pointedly today, he was asked a question about, is he happy? And the answer was along the lines of, when I'm coaching the players, I'm happy, yes. Everything else isn't okay there. And it should be a real worry for supporters and for the club itself that, again, I use that phrase, that the best thing that's happened to them, Eddie Howe, the manager, is in a situation where he feels like this now, and that there is that tension and that the relationship with himself and Paul Mitchell clearly needs a lot of work. And on the evidence of what we've seen so far since the start of July, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in terms of delivering the signings they needed or wanted, whereby from what I'm led to believe, Paul Mitchell did take the lead in negotiations with Crystal Palace. He was actively working as the sporting director. And for him to come and say that it was almost, wasn't his responsibility, he was just playing that, quote, supporting role, clearly there are issues and differences there. And Eddie Howe and Paul Mitchell have exchanged an awful lot of words during the course of the past 9 days. The problem is none of it has been with each other. It's all been through the press. So it isn't working in terms of the position. It's left the club from a PR perspective, from everyone looking in. And, a lot of this as well comes back to Darren Eales. Darren Eales took the keys to the kingdom at the start of the summer when Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Quddusi were forced out of the club, felt they had no option but to go after what had gone on internally. Darren Eales said he wanted to have more control. He wanted to be able to do his job in terms of not having any other influence or interference. You might argue that's fair enough. He's the chief executive, but he's got to sort this out now because this has been on his watch. And this summer, in terms of the guys who have come in and their immediate working relationship with, again, I use the phrase, the best guy they've got at the club in the manager, it's left them in this situation. And quite frankly, it's a mess and they've got to sort it out. Now, where does this leave Eddie Howe going forward? Well, thankfully, the transfer window is closed. And I think today probably will draw a line under the questions regards himself and Paul Mitchell. And he's got football to focus on. He's got 3 away games on the bounce now in quick succession, followed by Manchester City at home. And Eddie, as he said himself, will be happy with that, back to focusing on the players. But longer term, there is a risk, a danger there that, like we've seen with previous managers, Rafa Benitez, Kevin Keegan, they don't feel they've got the working conditions to give it their very best. And that is why I use the phrase, it's over to Darren Eales, Paul Mitchell, and others to sort it out. Now, in terms of where they are on the pitch, it's 7 points from 9. They've done okay. They've managed to find a way to get results. I don't think they're playing particularly well, I have to admit. And when you look at it, it probably can go one of two ways. That might be stating the obvious, but is it a case of they've drawn on those reserves of strength, togetherness, character, everything else to extract 7 points from 9 in progression from the Cup, and then when fitness comes and when things start to click and there's more cohesion, we'll see a return to the Newcastle United we know, and that's everything will be okay. Now, I would like to think like that. I do think that is probably the most likely outcome, but there's also the other side of it where you think, actually, have they got enough? Have they not strengthened in key areas such as right wing, such as centre half? Is it a case of what we've seen during the first 3 or 4 matches of the season that, yeah, there might just be issues going forward and that they did need a refresh, they did need new players coming in, not just to strengthen those positions, but also to bring more out of others as well. So a lot of unanswered questions coming out of the first round of fixtures on so many levels, on and off the pitch. But no, it's a busy period coming up. One thing that did come out of it this morning is that, yeah, Newcastle will probably have to see through that without Callum Wilson. Eddie said he hasn't had a setback, but nonetheless, he's not where they perhaps wanted him to be, and hopefully he would be over the next few weeks. So when you're talking in terms of the language of a few weeks, that to me would suggest we might not see Callum Wilson before the next international break. Now, on the subject of internationals, and this was the content of my Inside Newcastle column this morning, which is available at Mail Plus and available in the description below the line as well. Eddie Howe and Newcastle have yet had no contact from the Football Association, and I'm not sure it will come now. Of course, I've been away with England the last couple of weeks, and everything I've seen from Lee Carsey I must admit. I think he handled himself well. There was 1 or 2 little tricky issues there, but in terms of what I saw on the pitch and off it as well, I think now, and this is coupled with, again, I go back to that opinion, married to information, that the job probably now is Lee Carsley's. And my colleague Sammy Mockbell reported during the week that the FA were beginning to talk to external candidates. I'm not entirely sure that that isn't just them following the process of what is needed in terms of recruiting something as big as an England manager. And that when it comes to it, before the end of the year, Lee Carsley will be appointed. So I'm not sure the England issue from a Newcastle perspective is perhaps as pressing and as big as it might have been post-Euros. Now again, and I keep on coming back to Paul Mitchell's interview. Now on that, we did ask Mitchell twice about Eddie Howe in England, and he didn't give a really strenuous denial, hands off, like Aaron Eales had done earlier in the summer when we asked him the same questions after the Euros. And again, there's some of that not just speak. He had the chance to shut the door. He left the door slightly ajar. Again, you know, he praised Eddie a lot in terms of what he can do as a coach and the job he has done at the club. But that was also part of the answer that Newcastle are on a journey, and if that means potentially, you know, the manager moving on and being the subject of interest from the FA, then the inference was almost so be it. And again, I talk about, you know, there's just little alarms going off over certain answers, and the general feel coming away from Paul Mitchell's interview 9 days ago and Eddie Howe's interview today is that all is not well, and that would be a worry. Now, yeah, belatedly, there is a game at Wolves on Sunday as well. Well, I'll keep the prediction brief, and I dare say quite a few of you guys will go along with this. I've actually got the last 3 predictions right. Yeah, I'll go for a 1-1 draw, and Newcastle might just take that after a, like I say, use that word, a turbulent couple of weeks again, when probably should have been a period of calm. You know, the window had closed. This 2 weeks was a chance for just to take Newcastle away from it all and just, you know, let the players go off into national duty. Eddie to do some work with those on the training ground. And because of Mitchell's interview and because Eddie clearly, obviously had to respond to that today, again, it's put them in the news for reasons where they probably don't need to be in the news. I know some supporters feel like that, but again, don't shoot the messengers, you know. We will always speak to, it's our duty as journalists to talk to as many different people as possible, to bring you guys a flavour of actually what is happening. If that's negative, if that's the word you want to use, then so be it. It's not negative, it's just realistic. And Newcastle do have some issues that they really need to address behind the scenes right now. But thankfully, on the pitch is a match that we can all enjoy on Sunday. So just to draw a line under this, we will have to revisit it at some point, but maybe now there'll just be a period where we can talk about football. So yeah, guys, thank you again for watching. Honestly, the comments below, give me your thoughts. What do you think of Mitchell's interview? What do you think of Eddie's response? What do you think of everything around the club right now? Put it below the line there. I'll try to reply to as many as possible. Hit like, hit subscribe, the thanks button there as well now. And I shall see you again soon. And just thankfully, for once, look at those trees there. There's not a wind in the air, is there? That's fairly unusual for these parts. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.